My guest today is Dr. Corey Hirsch, licensed clinical social worker. Where can people find you?
My website is www.pxpconsultants.com.
Fabulous. I hit the jackpot with you. We've been support system for one another for how long now?
I don't know, at least 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, this is really brilliant. And we met through Amanda. What's your experience with
Amanda? Let's get some context
Of
about
course.
this whole thing. In 2020 was when we all went online, and it started with a group of about 18 or 20 women. And by 2022, it was about 80 women from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk about how amazing that is. Amazing, just like
Amazing.
she says. And there's this woman who is very soft-spoken in a certain way. She's very, very caring. She's very heartfelt. She's very loving, but she has boundaries, really good boundaries. And she says it like it is, which is what I need, because I'm like a skirter. I can find ways to, I don't even know that I'm doing it, but I can find ways to get into the groove and sneak around without even knowing it. And Amanda does not allow that to happen. But we had this group of 18 women that over time morphed into a group of 80 women from all around the world. And we were checking in, we were helping each other with financial issues and helping each other grow our businesses and just celebrating each other on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, which is so incredible. What a commitment. When I look back, and I look forward to it every single week. I hate when I have to miss because I'm busy and I can't check in. But it morphed into this thing about a year ago that was called the $1 Million Club. And what she did was she had sort of an experiment run a few years earlier with a small group of women where they kind of went into a personal growth, a deep dive into personal growth. And they did it so quickly and so fast that it became overwhelming and they kind of burnt out. So Amanda last year decided to reinvigorate the $1 Million Club. It soon became the $1 Billion Club because we just couldn't, limit ourselves.
Why not?
Exactly. And so we started into this deep dive of personal growth, and we started listening and reading and talking and making changes in our lives and supporting each other and having accountability buddies. And I mean, it's a mastermind. It is
really
such an
is.
unbelievable experience. And I feel so grateful. I feel like I landed on the moon.
We really did.
It's that unlikely to happen to me.
It is.
That I land in this group of amazing women from all different areas. It would be as likely for me to land on the moon as for me to end up in this group. And I'm so, so grateful.
Yeah.
And it's just been a ride. And so for me personally, it took me from feeling quite small and feeling quite alone. Remember, it was during the pandemic and quite isolated. And somehow through Zoom and this group of women, my whole world just opened up in a major, major way. And it's just changed everything for me.
Yeah, it's profound. And it's when we talk about the education of what we get to study, it really does come back to self-improvement. We have to study self-improvement. And the most important person to improve, obviously, is ourself. And so it gave me an opportunity to really fall in love with myself in a way that I never had before, and to really adore myself and to honor myself.
Absolutely.
And because the group is like the wind beneath my wings, I was able to really figure out, first of all, if I was safe enough to be able to talk about my bipolar diagnosis. That was where it was birthed from. And I had no idea. I had no idea. I always wanted to be in a group of women like this, and I was terrified. 100%. And I had no idea how I would ever attract the quality of women that we are. Basically what we do is we question our first thoughts, and they're all old stories, which you know so much about since you're a doctor.
Yes.
And we get to really look at those. And Amanda is the one that does not let us. So we start rambling, right? A person rambles on about their story and this happened, that, and she slaps it right out of there immediately and brings us into the reality of what actually is, so that we can have a new paradigm and shift to become the brilliant people that we are. And Battered Brilliance came out of that relationship with all of you. I mean, it was just like, oh, this is a perfect place for me, because I'd only told a handful of people that I had a diagnosis of bipolar. I was terrified. Number one thing that would happen to me when I would tell girlfriends in the past that I had that, they disappeared. Sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly, but I could feel it on the phone call. I could feel it when we were in front of each other, that it would just like shift. And Battered Brilliance really is about, what's the batter? What are the ingredients that went into the batter of your life that you stirred like a cauldron to find the brilliance of who you are? And you have so many experiences of that. One of the things that I love about you is that you were able to really look at your perfectionism and your people pleasing, and how that was keeping you like small.
Very small. Yes. So the first instance of people pleasing and perfectionism that I can remember a lot from elementary school. That's kind of typical kid stuff. But when I went to graduate from college, I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to be a therapist, but I didn't know myself well enough to be firm in that conviction. And I was talking to my parents about it. My mom's a lawyer, and my boyfriend was applying to law school. And my parents suggested that I did not want to be a therapist because, I didn't want to sit around listening to people's problems all day. Well, I didn't know myself well enough to realize that I didn't see it that way. I didn't see it that way. I wanted to be a therapist because I wanted to help people. I wanted to bring people together and create peace and harmony. And instead, my parents encouraged me to go to law school. Well, that was sort of like the easy way out. It was kind of the thing to do. There was also status involved with that my ego liked. And so I went to law school. And my first semester, I was a complete wreck. I remember reading my first case. It was like, whew, from the minute it started, I felt like I was in way over my head and that I could not get control over this wave. I definitely was not sleeping well, and I was just dreaming, living law school. I was a total disaster. And my mom kept trying to help me and encourage me to go to therapy. And then she found this therapist who does hypnosis rather. It finally got so bad that I was willing to do anything. I didn't think I had time to even go to the first meeting, but I went, and he, over a course of a few weeks, got me into a groove of learning how to do self-hypnosis. And what I found was that I never understood the subconscious mind. But what hypnosis is it's all stories, but our subconscious mind takes in what it needs to get the messages that it wants to use to get us to where we want to go. So some people call it autosuggestion. Some people call it meditation. There's a difference with meditation and hypnosis, and that is the suggestions that we make to the unconscious mind, to the subconscious mind. But what happened was amazing. I went from my first semester, I got C's, and I even got a D+, which was like heartbreaking for me. I had never gotten anything but A's and B's. So that was total confirmation that I was not good enough to do law school, that I couldn't do it. And once I got through learned this hypnosis, I went on my second semester, and from there on out to get A's and B's. And it just calmed my central nervous system down. And it helped me, once I got calmed down, I was able to focus and take the information in. I went from C's and that one D+, which was mortifying to me, and I went on to get A's and B's. I could approach studying and life from a methodical, intentional place. I thought I didn't have time to go to therapy to help myself with this, but what my therapist suggested, and it was totally true, is I didn't have time not to. Because this spinning that I was doing, the spinning, I was all out here. And once I learned self-hypnosis and got my central nervous system calmed down, I was right here. And everything became much more effective, clearer. I became much more efficient. I was able to study and digest and get what I needed to get from a very calm place. And then I got to go home from the library and like go eat dinner and relax and hang out with my boyfriend. And it was so much better. And I used that approach also to pass the California bar. I really had doubts about my ability to pass the California bar because I still felt so out of my element, even though I was doing it and I was doing well. But I kept digging into that calm place with the hypnosis. I kept using the hypnosis recordings that I had. The people pleaser in me went to law school because my parents wanted me to. And so I had to graduate. I had to pass the bar. I had to go out and practice law because that's what I was supposed to do. And I had spent a lifetime doing for others. I've had a great life, but I did a lot of things to please others. And now I realized that I was abandoning myself all along the way. And it created a bunch of feelings that were not serving me well at all.
Mm-hmm.
So the beautiful thing is hypnosis brought me to a place where I was very, very safe in my own body and in my own mind. And I could do what I needed to do, even when I thought I couldn't.
It's just really great to hear your story. So the hypnosis piece, break it down for me. One of the things that I do, and I don't do it in a methodic way, I just cobble it together to, like you said, calm my central nervous system. But you have a method, which I would love to hear about.
With hypnosis, a lot of people think hypnosis is like what we hear about with entertainment. That is not hypnosis. That is pure entertainment where people get control over someone else's mind and body and they make them do weird things like dance like a chicken or stuff like that, right? That is not hypnosis. That is just entertainment. But with hypnosis, what we do is we calm ourselves down. We get ourselves into a very, very, very deep, relaxed space. And we just slow everything down. From that relaxed state, we can go into what's called trance, which is a state of mind where time is irrelevant, space is irrelevant. Everything is pretty much irrelevant except for what we're listening to and where our mind goes, which oftentimes might feel like sleep because you're just totally unaware. You're so relaxed that you're just totally unaware of what's happening. But what it is I tell myself a story. I take myself on a journey now. When I was in law school, I would take myself to this lake, and I was always sitting by this lake, and there were fir trees around, and then a beach chair,
Oh, funny.
which is, it's whatever you want it to be. But I would get myself into trance, and I would go sit in that safe space, and I would sit there and just sit. And somehow I almost imagined that lake giving me superpowers, calming my central nervous system, calming my whole body down. And then I would bring myself back out of trance. And lo and behold, I was just as I wanted to be. I tell my clients stories and use suggestion to help them get to the goals that they're wanting to get to through hypnosis. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's almost like magic, but it totally, totally works. It's what athletes use to prepare for matches or games or events. They visualize themselves. It's a different form of hypnosis. They get themselves into a very relaxed space. I did it when I was a horseback rider, and I used to do it without knowing that I was doing it in my mind over and over and over again. And it's almost like my body took over. It knows what it needs to do, and it just did it for me as though I had rehearsed it a million times. It's really, really, really powerful. And we're all doing that.
We are.
We are all doing that all the time when we get to high school and we imagine ourselves graduating. That's hypnosis. Same thing with college. Same thing with wanting a career. We see it in our mind's eye over and over and over again. And we are just sort of drawn to it. There's no way we can't get there.
Yes. That's a great way to talk about how you can manifest, because when we're little and we see ourselves winning the swim meet and all of, winning the match, it's like, oh, that's great. But I never tied it in as I was creating my future in the very moment. And so now I create my future now by living what I'm going to have. I embody it now. I live it now. I speak into it now. And so that gives life to it. So it actually does become more of a tool, and it's a game, right? But luckily enough, the game actually is won, because if I look through all of the triumphs that I've had, I did it exactly that way. But now what you're talking about is giving it a step-by-step process. And when I was in the ingredients of my batter and trying to figure out the morass of it all, I wasn't in touch with the intuitive side of myself, which was innate, which you're talking about. We develop it in childhood.
Yes.
I wasn't in touch with that. I still had limiting beliefs and all of these stories that I carried around with me that were clouding that. Now, the limiting beliefs and the stories, they've dismantled themselves. I had to teach myself how to do it.
There's a guy named Jim Rohn
Yes,
that
love
we
Jim.
studied. And one of the things that he said, which was so powerful and so true, is that if you want to be a millionaire, you have to start acting like a millionaire today.
That's right.
A lot of people hear that and think that means start spending a lot of money.
Right.
But what they don't understand is that millionaires don't go around spending a lot of money until the right time. So if we want to be a millionaire, we have to start raising our vibration, raising ourselves to the standard of how a millionaire lives. And we have to take on some of the roles of a millionaire. Otherwise, when we get our $1 million, just like all of the lottery winners, the money's going to go right through our hands.
That's right.
Right? So we have to become that person from today moving forward. And it's not lying to yourself.
No.
It's raising yourself to the standard of the person that you want to become, so that you're not going to do it all at once. It's scaffolding. And so little by little, perhaps like for me, part of that was being punctual. I always ran late. Always, my whole life. If I was 15 minutes late, that was good. A half hour late was like, that was running late. But now I want to be this, I'm elevating myself to the next level. I want to be this professional person. It sounds so silly, but that's something that I work really hard on, because that's what professional people do. They show up on time, or they show up early. And it's little things like that that we have to implement and become that person now, so that when the time is right, we just sit right into it. We just melt right into it, and we have whatever we want.
Yeah. And it could be $1 million for us. That's one of the things, but you could replace that with anything. Anything.
Yes. So for me, it's being of service to others. It's helping people through therapy. I also do life strategy work, which is a lot of what I've learned in this group of women that we're in, from Amanda and from all of the people that we've studied along the way. I want to help people get what we got. If I can, I would love to create a group of women like that resembles our group, although nothing could resemble our group because it's so amazing. But I also do divorce mediation. And so I'm of service to couples who are wanting to get divorced, so that they don't have to go through the acrimony and all of the conflict and bad feelings and the expense of divorce going through courtroom litigation. So for me, a lot of my vision has to do with helping people, and the money will come, but it really is about being of service.
Yes.
And I think you asked me about the difference between hypnosis and meditation.
I did.
Okay. So meditation is about quieting the mind and seeing the thoughts and just letting them go by. When you're in trance, it's almost like you don't have thoughts. And it's a little bit different. And the other thing is, with meditation, it's about allowing the thoughts to be. With hypnosis, I make suggestions that speak to the unconscious mind, to the subconscious mind, so that you can get to where the person can get to where they want to go.
Like, for instance, if I were getting ready, and we're not going to do hypnosis here because it's dangerous.
Well, it wouldn't be dangerous.
So before you go into this trance, this hypnosis, do you have questions that you are looking to have answered in your life, right?
Yes. So when I'm prepping a client for hypnosis, I always ask, what are their goals? I always ask what they're afraid of, because that's important to know. Sometimes I help people get deep into trance by escorting them into an elevator. But if somebody has a phobia of elevators, that's not a very safe space to put them in to
Right.
get to a very relaxed space. So I ask questions about what their goals are,
Like,
about,
for instance, let me just interject.
yeah,
I had questions about coming out with my bipolar. I had all kinds of limiting beliefs about that. I was terrified that I'd never find a life partner, that I'd never be able to make any money, that I'd only live a certain life. And the other thing that was terrifying for me because of mania and going into that, I didn't dream anymore. I wasn't spontaneous in my actions because once I was diagnosed, I realized, oh my gosh, that could be mania building up. So I would squash it. And I was like, well, what's the point of living?
if you can't,
If I
you
can't do that.
embrace that feeling of excitement.
Right.
So it sounds to me like you were feeling, if you got excited about something, you were afraid that it was going to open the door to a manic episode.
That's right.
Which can be very, very scary.
Mm-hmm.
Mania can be very, very scary for people. I used to teach diagnosis and treatment planning at Pepperdine. I was an adjunct professor. And one of the things that we talked about was the positive and negative impacts of diagnoses. And for a lot of people, when they hear bipolar disorder, there is a huge stigma around it, exactly what you're talking about. And so people, they might be afraid, they might belittle, they might misunderstand or judge. So it becomes sort of a very isolating experience, is what I think you were referring to, because you have this diagnosis and it's not really easy to understand a bipolar diagnosis. But there's an isolation that comes with it. For a lot of people, diagnosis, and I don't know if this was your experience, but diagnosis gives a name to what you're experiencing, and that can be very comforting on one level.
Sure. Right?
It can also be really scary because the bipolar disorder sounds like a big diagnosis.
A life
sounds
sentence.
Scary, very, very scary. And there is this experience of not knowing the difference between joy, excitement, having fun, and a manic episode, which can be very, very disconcerting. I think that's what you're referring to is, am I entering a dangerous zone if I get too excited? And then thinking that you can never get excited or feel joy again. That's a scary place to be.
Scary.
But the fortunate thing is we live in a time where there are so many interventions, not just medicine, but there's medicine, there's therapy, there's meditation, there's all kinds of exercise, so many interventions that we can use to help people who have bipolar disorder so that they can live a very, very full life, a life with excitement, a life with joy, a life with interactions with others. I mean, I always tell people that there is no better time than right now to have these kinds of problems because we have the best interventions available. And so there was never a better time to have bipolar disorder than today.
I love that. That's great. There's never a better time to have bipolar than today.
The problem is that people misunderstand bipolar. They think it's when people are moody or fickle. They change their minds a lot. That is not bipolar disorder. Mania is actually a very beautiful event. Your experience having bipolar disorder and taking it to this beautiful, this brilliant place where the magic happens and the world is just beautiful, and you don't have to be manic to see it that way. One of the symptoms of mania is the world kind of looks like it's in Technicolor, right? When you're in mania, it's kind of the world opens up, spacious and colorful, and everything is happening, and it's fast and exciting. But my understanding is that you can have that experience without being in mania. People who don't have bipolar disorder are able to have that experience too, and it's not mania.
What you do with your hypnosis can help people who are suffering in the moment of their bipolar and they don't know that they have any greatness, like I was in the bedroom, just suffering.
I've never done hypnosis with people who have bipolar disorder. People who have bipolar disorder diagnosis have this sense that something's wrong with them.
Yeah.
And the reality is we all have some limiting belief that drives us through our lives. And as long as we're not aware of that limiting belief, we will continue to be driven by that thought. So for some people, it's there's something wrong with me. For some people, it's I'm not good enough. I know for me, I had the limiting belief that if I was successful, that people wouldn't like me. And I had to get over, it was tied into that people-pleasing piece. But the point that I was making in terms of having this limiting belief is people who have diagnoses are not very different from anybody else. We all have thoughts. We all have limiting beliefs. But if we let our limiting beliefs, whether we have a diagnosis or not, keep us upstairs in the bedroom in the dark, then we are going to suffer. Our lives are going to be very, very small. And the whole point of everything that we've been talking about is to get out of this, whether you have a diagnosis or not, and to get into that. And that's where we want to go. But I think you were telling me about your experience.
Well, of course, there were the high highs and the low lows. But after I was diagnosed with my psychiatrist, who's fabulous, Dr. Kelly Wywodzik, I don't know if you know who he is, but I walked into the room and my hair was falling out and I was stuttering and I weighed 108 pounds and I was like in a little huddle of myself. I mean, it was like, what the hell happened to me? Where did I go? Like, where did I go? And he said to me, and it set me free, this is what this is. You have a chemical imbalance. That's all this is. We have to come up with a cocktail and a mind-body wellness regime that's going to work for you. And you're going to have to work really hard at claiming yourself in this. When he said all we have to focus on is recalibrating the chemistry, I was able to take a breath. He then also said, you will come back. You're brilliant, genius, creative, out-of-the-box thinker will be there in full force, bigger than you ever imagined it to be without the mania.
I think people talk about mental illness as though people who have mental health issues are outliers. But the reality is that we all live on a continuum. We all live on a spectrum of mental health issues, and different people have different peaks and valleys in terms of what symptoms arise for them. So we have to remember that a diagnosis is a compilation of different symptoms that add up. If you have this many symptoms, maybe sleeplessness, maybe hyperverbalization, maybe being overly focused on a goal. There's symptoms of bipolar disorder. People get really focused on a goal and they stay up all night working on it. They get excited about it. They get compulsive and impulsive about it, but they don't have the other symptoms. They might have symptoms, but they don't necessarily add up to a bipolar disorder diagnosis. So we are all on the spectrum when it comes to mental health. It's just a matter of some of us have more symptoms that add up so that now there's a name for it. But there's nothing to be scared of with a bipolar diagnosis.
Unless you decide that you're going to go at your own and not take the medication and not pay attention to the bipolar diagnosis.
The depression is very, very scary with bipolar disorder. Depression can be very, very scary for anybody. People can get so hopeless that they don't want to live anymore. And that's the most terrifying thing for any diagnosis is this, fear that people might not want to live anymore. But what can happen with mania is when people are manic, one of the symptoms, and it's there for a lot of people who have mania, is this interest in doing this pattern of doing dangerous things. Like spending money, like driving fast, having sexual encounters with multiple partners, and not practicing safe sex. These kinds of binge events that have a danger to them. That's part of what's scary about mania. But the other piece is when people who have bipolar disorder are not medicated, there can be a very big feeling of hopelessness. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I can't live like this anymore. I can't stand getting so high. And there's lots of often negative consequences from being in that mania. And then when the mania wears off, now the person might be left with, the consequences of what happened during the mania, and that exacerbates the depression. People can get frustrated with that lifestyle of, mania, fast action, excitement, lots of activity, and then the drop off. And suicide, it can be a very, very real result of unmedicated bipolar disorder.
Yes.
Because the medication helps even everything out. People are sometimes afraid that the manic episodes will go away because it can be quite enjoyable.
Euphoric.
Exactly. Mania can be quite enjoyable. So the medication doesn't take the piece of the mania that's enjoyable away. It doesn't make you a zombie. It just helps everything temper a little bit so that it's more in the range of what is considered in that bell curve of what typical people are experiencing. So perhaps you might be involved in goal-directed activity, but you don't have to stay up all night to do it necessarily. Right. So some of the symptoms that make mania dangerous get sort of subdued with the medicine.
I lived in a, I guess you would call it a manic state. I also called it being a type A personality, but I functioned. I was on TV. I wrote a book. I created a company. So much was happening for me. And this was prior to being diagnosed with the bipolar. So I lived in this very elevated state for many, many years. And I accomplished a lot. A series of things happened all at the same time. And then I had a break. I had a psychotic break. I was in a mental institution. In my case, I've tracked it, and it is genetic in my family. My sister also was diagnosed at the same exact time, even though we're 6 years apart. I mean, it just altered my life forever. In bipolar, my experience, but I know I'm not alone because millions of people suffer from this. They're afraid to have visions of another exciting part of their life. And the hypnosis, like you talked about being on the beach, and then there's a lounge chair and you got to sit in it. You take them on a journey to find the brilliance in all the batter, all the ingredients that are going on in their head that tell them, I'll never have a brilliant life again.
Well, certainly hypnosis could help calm the central nervous system down.
Right.
If the person is able to sit and take it in. Now, part of hypnosis is a recognition that someone has to believe that it's going to help. If you're resisting hypnosis, it's not likely that it's going to help. It's not my job to fight someone's interest in trying to prove hypnosis wrong. I really want to help people, and if they're willing to be helped, I'm happy to do it. With mania, certainly there's, in terms of this fear of looking into the future and perhaps worrying about grandiosity and getting overexcited about the future, certainly hypnosis can help with that.
Yes. So also in the practice of meditation, it sounds very similar.
I was curious, how do you, because I know that you use meditation a lot, how does it help you with your diagnosis?
Well, it does calm the central nervous system, for sure. It also gives me an opportunity just to be able to embrace everything that I am and know that, I'm all that I need to be. All the unanswered questions that I have had in my life, I've been able to answer with people like you and our group, right? And also just being able to take in all of the spiritual teachers that I've had. So they come into my meditation. And I am that I am, right? So everything that I think that I want and everything that I see in the world that is loving, kind, and being of service and calmness and in a creative space where everybody gets to rise, I do that.
When you're taking that in, you're giving yourself suggestion to be calm. You're giving yourself suggestion to rise.
Yes.
You're giving yourself suggestion to be that person that you want to be. That's autosuggestion. That's self-hypnosis. So you're doing it without even knowing it.
I love that. So how do you want to serve the greater good with the brilliance that you've found?
Well, I would love to teach everybody self-hypnosis. I would love to help people if we get stuck in the limiting belief that there's something wrong with me because I have a diagnosis. We are going to stay stuck. And the reality is that everybody has limiting beliefs. And it seems like we're the only one, whether we have a diagnosis or not. We are geared for survival.
Yes.
And so our first thought as animals, as human beings that have a biological mechanism that's geared for survival, is to look for danger. And that's where that story, there's something wrong with me, comes from. So we want to dismantle that, and we want to normalize that and bring it down to earth so that we can build from that and say, I'm amazing. I have this strength. I have this quality. I have that quality. And I can go out in the world. Again, taking someone from this place where they have a limiting belief to recognizing that we all have opportunities to be this brilliant, almost like the genie in Aladdin, right? To take up the room, to fulfill our space with all that we are. We just have to untangle those limiting beliefs and replace that with a vision of where we want to go, and that burning desire that we read about in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, right? That burning desire. If we're willing to do whatever we want, whatever we can, whatever, needs to happen to make that burning desire, that vision happen, then there is no way it can't happen. The problem is that not everybody is willing to do what it takes to get there. And that's okay.
Part of the suffering that I want to be of service to are the people, the millions of people who are on the street, who have genius in their lives. I mean, extraordinary genius. And to use them as an opportunity to inform rather than to shun, shame, and use judgment to keep them in the position where they are. They can inform so much about what's happening.
Yes.
And what I'm doing in Battered Brilliance is a love letter, really. It's a love letter first for myself, right? But then when I looked at it and people would say, well, how are you going to make money doing it? And how are you going to this and that? The thought was never, how am I going to make money at it? It was, wow, look what I've achieved. I have actually figured out the ingredients in my batter, and I have given it a space to celebrate brilliance in everybody's life. I mean, that alone, that's the only thing I want to do, right?
You're a model for so many people, for anybody who comes into contact with you. You're a model for looking at our lives and loving exactly what we have and what we have had. We started this discussion, right, talking about people pleasing and performing for others and trying to fulfill other people's expectations of us. And one of the things that I have learned that is so incredibly powerful that really helps clients is be selfish. We talk about being selfish as though it's a bad thing. And we glamorize and really euphemize this idea that it's wonderful to be selfless. He never thought about himself. He was always taking care of others. But when we are not selfish, we are selfless. And that means less than ourselves. And what happens when we don't take care of ourselves is we end up depleting our energy, getting to that very small space where we don't know who we are. And we end up often resenting the people around us that we have chosen to help, to do things for. We end up resenting them and feeling angry, lonely, and afraid. So I encourage every adult in this world, take care of yourself. Don't depend on other people to take care of you. Don't be there to, you can help other people, but you are not responsible for another adult's happiness, for their life, for their well-being. Obviously, if somebody is sick or infirmed and they're not able to literally take care of themselves, that's a different story. But this idea that couples should be like this and become one, that flies in the face of my beliefs. I really believe that two adults, whole adults, come together and two is better than one. And that is probably controversial, but I can't say enough about how important it is for each of us to take care of ourselves. I work with individuals who are unhappy in their marriage and they're contemplating divorce, and often they're talking about how their needs are not met by their partner. And the reality is that we don't need anything from anybody else. We expect people, friends, others to satisfy our expectations. And they're not even aware that you think they have a contract with you to do that.
Exactly.
And that breeds tons of resentment.
But what comes up for me is you talk about being the whole. I'm the whole now. I'm not in a relationship, but I will be in one where the other person understands 100% about the diagnosis of bipolar. And I will be able to no longer have that fear.
Yeah.
And that is really fabulous. The other thing I wanted to say real quick is we're talking about generations of grandmothers who are telling us, just be happy with what you have.
Oh,
What you have is enough. Don't want for more. Look around you. Be grateful for what you have. My mother's 81. She thinks I'm so high and mighty.
Well, yes, isn't that wonderful?
Isn't it?
Exactly. And it's not to step on other people's toes. It's to live your full, vibrant life.
That's right.
I think everybody does better when the world is open and free and we can all do what we need to do.
Exactly.
It's important that we don't step on other people's toes.
Right.
But people are terrified of people like you and me.
They are.
Who want to not rule the world, but we just want to be our fullest, most amazing, grandest, not grandiose
expression of ourselves, which is the birthright gift that every human being has.
Absolutely. And we get to spread that energy to everybody that comes in contact with us.
And we do now, because we are a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
We are. This is how you change the face of anything in the world that is negative, and most especially mental health and mental illness. It's by having this kind of a conversation.
I'm so grateful that you were here today. I love you so much.
I love you too.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, the best.